Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pride Action TV. We're a live and interactive show that is a project of the Pride Action Tank and the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. During the show, you can call in with questions or comments for our guests by calling 312-738-1060. My name is Kim Hunt, and I'm the Executive Director of the Pride Action Tank, which is a social justice lab devoted to improving outcomes for LGBTQ communities through a collaborative process of inquiry, advocacy, and action. Our focus areas are aging, financial security, health, housing, safety, and youth. And you can find out more about us at prideactiontank.org. So tonight, I am talking with Angie Miller, who is the Senior Director of Housing and Behavioral Health Services at the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. And we're going to talk about housing issues for members of LGBTQ communities and other vulnerable populations. Angie has worked with housing and homeless issues for more than 15 years and has experience in the fields of substance abuse treatment, HIV/AIDS, as well as sexual assault and domestic violence. So welcome to the show, Angie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. So we have a whole bunch of information that we want to pass on to folks. So we're just going to jump right in. So first of all, let's start with the basics. Tell us what supportive housing is and in particular AFC's model of supportive housing.
Sure. So supportive housing is what we view at AFC as a type of housing along the continuum of housing and support services. And so AFC's model of supportive housing is to look at an individual and their need and whether they need emergency one-time assistance or utility assistance, or if they need shorter-term assistance, a long-term rental subsidy with light services attached, or what is called our supportive housing model, which is intensive case management and housing assistance with these wraparound services attached to it. So AFC kind of views our supportive housing as one piece in a continuum of housing and support services that an individual may need. And it could be for a variety of reasons on why people need supportive housing, and it can be a variety of reasons on why people need one-time assistance.
Can you go into that for a little more? Like, who are the folks and,
sure.
And why this happens?
So it's interesting because housing assistance is fairly complex to understand. When we receive calls from individuals or working through our partner agencies, clients coming into our partner agencies, sometimes people are impacted by a sudden job loss, recent hospitalization, maybe they have car repairs that they need to do and have to choose between getting their car repaired or paying their rent. But they may have a job or they have other employment or entitlements or benefits. And so that support is only really needed that one time. And it can address the issue at hand, eliminate the crisis, and people are be able to remain housed and have housing stability. There are some individuals that come into AFC's housing programs that are impacted with a multiple of barriers, such as having numerous chronic medical conditions, having mental health or substance use needs, and also they may have recently lost a job or lost family support, and they are homeless, living in the street or the shelter system. And without the housing and support services to really kind of move them on and support them to achieve housing stability and income self-sufficiency and have access to linkages and referrals to services such as mental health counseling or substance use services, or even just medical services. So those individuals are really in need of those supportive services that a one-time assistance really cannot support them. They need to have an ongoing support network.
Such a fragile thing. Having housing sounds so incredibly important and has such an influence on other outcomes.
Yes, it's what a lot of research has shown, and including AFC's own research with the Chicago Housing for Health Partnership research study, is that by people having access to this supportive housing model, that not only are their needs being addressed, but and they're getting that self-sufficiency support that they need, but that also it actually saves money by the healthcare system and other types of system that are impacted by people being homeless.
So I know people assume, I should say, that the AIDS Foundation of Chicago would just focus on HIV and AIDS. So what is the goal that AFC has around supportive housing? Why is this so important to the work?
So for AFC, and it's part of our strategic priority, is to really work with individuals that obviously have HIV and AIDS, but are also vulnerable to HIV and AIDS transmission. And it is a priority to have HIV housing, and about 40% of our housing is specifically dedicated for people with HIV. But we do have housing that we work with that is funded by HUD to work with people that are not HIV positive and have these same situations in their life. And so we work very closely with the local HUD and the Chicago Continuum of Care to provide housing and these intensive wraparound support services for people that have HIV and that do not have HIV, but meet HUD's criteria of being homeless or chronically homeless.
Okay. I want to remind folks that this is a call-in show. The number is 312-738-1060. And I know you have some resources that we can talk about.
Sure.
In case people are in this situation and are looking for some assistance. Can you tell us what these are?
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest barriers to housing is not really knowing the system and not really knowing who to contact or how to get services. And so it might be somebody that is watching individually. They might know somebody that is currently a friend or a family member that is going through housing crisis and really needs assistance. So I want to just bring to light some resources. There is what's called the Central Referral System, which is www.chicagocrs.org, and that is somebody can access that with a caseworker that they may be working with, their local, if they go to their local Department of Family and Support Services, they can ask a caseworker there to help access that, or they can go online at a public library or any place with an internet connection that if they put that information in, they will be asked a series. It's like a screener. It's quite long, and they can be able to get resources there. They can call Chicago, for the city of Chicago, 311 and ask for short-term help. Obviously, go to the nearest Chicago Department of Family and Support Services. And then there's two other options, the ChicagoHousingOptions.org and then the Illinois Housing Search, and those might be for people that don't meet the homeless criteria but are still in need of housing assistance.
It's very important information, and we'll try to show that again. I know we have a caller. Hello?
Yes, good evening. I was just listening to your program. It's great program. But what I was thinking, I'm a veteran. And I don't care if you're LGBTQ or gay or transgender. If you were a veteran, you ought to be taken care of first. I mean, you talk about disability. Well, we got ours when we were in the service. We got shot at. You know, lost a leg and arm, and the Veterans Association hospitals are not taking care of us. They're not. You have to wait for 5, even 6 months to see a psychiatrist. You have to wait that long to enroll in one housing. Why can't anybody who takes money from the government take care of the veterans first with that money, and then take care of the other people? Because the veterans have given arms, legs, and their lives so that people that were in the service were taken care of first. I know it's a complicated question, but thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you so much for calling in, and thank you for your service. We're gonna we'll talk about that. So thank you for that.
So I'm not sure if you're aware, but HUD does have a strategic priority to address veteran homelessness. It's ending veteran homelessness, I believe, by 2017. So it's a huge initiative of HUD, and you should be able to get access through those resources through the local VA. But if you do go on to the chicagocrs.org and put in that you are a veteran, there is a specific veteran kind of category that helps really identify those veterans and make sure that they are connected into HUD's resources in the community. So it is very important. AFC also proudly supports the HUD Veteran Initiative established by HUD and managed by All Chicago, one of the agencies, homeless service, collaboration of homeless service providers, and has dedicated funds towards furnishings and other client support to help veterans as they transition from homelessness into housing. And so definitely if a veteran is out there and in need of housing services, I would recommend that they either contact their local VA or connect in with All Chicago or go to the chicagocrs.org and make sure that they identify themselves as a veteran.
Very good. I know, as you know, because you were part of the summit, Pride Action Tank recently had a tiny home summit, and in some parts of the country there are actually these tiny home communities specifically for veterans who have experienced homelessness. So there are several models that are being established, and as you mentioned, there's this national initiative to end homelessness for veterans, and I know there's some pretty aggressive work going on here in Chicago. So thank you so much for that call and for bringing up that issue. AFC does a lot of other organizations do quite a bit, and we are all impacted by this budget impasse. 2 years in now.
It's been a long 2 years.
Yeah. So what's going on here? What can people do to get involved and advocate for the change that needs to happen?
Yes. So most people don't realize that when money is given from HUD into Chicago and other continuums across the state, so this is not just Chicago, but across the state, HUD does require agencies to match that money. So HUD doesn't give us the full amount of money needed. They are very generous in giving us full amounts for housing subsidies, but the service pieces, that is so vital. So your case manager, your CADC, your mental health counselor, your life skills trainer, your employment workforce development counselor, those services have to be found elsewhere. And AFC, like many other service providers across the state, relied on the state Illinois Department of Human Services for that funding. It's a specific funding pot called Services in Support of Housing. And with the budget impasse from this has been going on for 2 years, and the stopgap that recently passed, which was only 65% of the services funding, many agencies are still providing 100% of the services.
Right.
And so I kind of liken it to Jenga, that you have your little Jenga blocks, and they are, you try to build it up, and when you start removing the pieces of the Jenga block, the whole thing could fall. And what is happening is providers are either reducing the services that they provide, eliminating maybe that employment employment counselor, that mental health counselor, that CADC, to really keep maybe just a case manager in place. But without that whole net of services, it really does impact that one individual or those thousands of individuals that are receiving supportive housing in the state. And one of the things that we tell people is to get involved in local advocacy. Legislators are back in their offices now. And
it's a good time to talk to them.
It's a wonderful time to talk to them. And you don't have to be an expert on supportive housing. You don't. You can call up and say, I support supportive housing. I support the state in providing services for people that need it. And let them know that that you are voting, and that you are in a constituent, and that this is something that is important to you. One of the things that people do not realize is that as these services go away, the individuals that still have these needs, they are still there. Yeah. And so it is not a disservice to our communities to have people there not receiving services. The services bring the value to communities. And so it is, I think, important. There are a couple of advocacy organizations we're going to list. The AFC obviously does its advocacy pretty big at aidschicago.org, and then you go on the left-hand side, there's a drop-down, and it says something like Get Involved and Advocacy. AFC does its advocacy days annually. We've also been sending out advocacy alerts and doing social media and tweeting and all the normal things that happen. There's also the Chicago Alliance to End Homelessness at allchicago.org. They are working on their own advocacy piece with other providers. The Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, huge advocates. And then also there is a separate planning body that works on less advocacy but more about planning, and that's the Chicago Area HIV Integrated Services Council, and they are at cahis.org. So it's important to get involved in coalitions or maybe connected to people that are already doing that advocacy, but you could also do individual advocacy on your own.
So, we've talked about coalitions with the advocacy work, and so obviously there are a number of organizations working on that front. What other supportive housing providers are there in the Chicago area?
Yeah, so AFC actually works with, in our programming, it's a partnership of 13 permanent supportive housing providers. We work with providers that are located on the north, south, and west side of the city, and our model is that we are based on client choice. Not everybody wants to live at north, not everybody wants to live south, not everybody wants to live west, and so the model is to have providers across the city where people want to live in the communities that they want to live, near the services that they receive, near their friends or their family, and so we work with those, but that is only AFC, and its partnership of 13 agencies are only 13 out of about 70 service providers within the Chicago area, and they are all providing different types of services. The model may not be the same as AFC's model, doesn't make it any less, or any more, but it is, AFC does have a specific model that we work off of, and the agencies are all go through the local process of what HUD calls the Chicago Continuum of Care, and we work with all Chicago, and there's a board and a governing board and a service providers council, and there's also a consumer or lived experience commission.
Lived Experience Commission.
Yes,
that's pretty
it's
cool.
Actually, and they're pretty awesome.
I like that. So just to be clear, some people may think that AFC has housing units that it is renting out. So how does that exactly work again? I know that there are partners, right? Yeah,
so basically AFC doesn't provide any direct services. We do take calls from people needing housing services, but we don't have the units. We don't own buildings. And so we work with partners, and some of them may own their own buildings, but most of the units we have are scattered site, so working with a private market landlord to rent, or we have partners that have congregations congregate living, like a Mercy Housing, who is a facility-based housing, or Chicago House. And we work with those partners in that type of setting. And really it's based on what a client is interested in, what they would like, where they would like to live, and what do they need, what types of services do they need. And so AFC has about 500 units of supportive housing. We do have responsibility to take from the CRS and other types of coordinated access for people trying to enter into supportive housing. But we do work across the city of Chicago, and we do work with partners that also have their own housing projects and also have to take from the Chicago CRS.
And what age group are we talking about?
So most housing is 18 to 24, okay. But we do have housing. There are specific projects for youth. AFC actually has an HIV youth housing project. And then we, and right now, youth homelessness and family homelessness, and more particularly children being homeless, is on the rise. And so there is a lot more work to be done in increasing the type of units for family and for unaccompanied youth in the city of Chicago. There's very few projects that serve those individuals, and it's it really is a high need. From the last point in time count, which was 2014, about a third of the people that were homeless were actually under the age of 18.
Wow.
And that's children and families, or maybe unaccompanied.
So you've been at this 15 years now.
Yeah, I've been at AFC for 12 years.
Wow, 12 of those 15.
And,
so what changes have you seen?
It's actually been, the changes over the last couple of years is really more of an acknowledgement that supportive housing, it not only does it save money, but a good model helps people to be able to become self-sufficient, be able to access employment, or if they're older, maybe access the benefits and entitlement, and be able to work on their chronic medical conditions or their other areas of their life that they're interested in working on, and have them be able to have really successful and healthy and happy lives. And so I think that a lot of the research is changing. You see more medical institutions kind of looking at people that are chronically ill and coming into the hospital system, and constantly, because they don't have a home. And so that when you're dealing with a chronic health condition and you're sick and you get discharged to the street or the shelter system, how are you going to get better? So I think that the shift really in the last 5 years, and more recently in the last 2, especially with ACA, is looking at people acknowledging that it is important. It is something that people need to recognize as a value.
Okay. Well, Angie, this is almost over. Can you believe it?
I thought you were really quick.
So I want to thank you once more for sharing this important information about supportive housing. And I know we have barely scratched the surface on this. Barely. So we love to have you come back at some point now that you've gotten this one time under your belt. We will be back in September. We do the show the first Friday of every month. So that Friday will be the Friday before Labor Day, so we still want you to watch. And on that show, our guest will be Congressman Mike Quigley, who will talk about his efforts to modify FDA's blood donation criteria, which unfairly discriminates against men who have sex with men. For over 30 years, they have been prohibited from donating blood for life based on sexual orientation rather than their level of risk. So thank you all for tuning in today. I want to remind you, you can find out more about us at prideactiontank.org, and we will see you next month.